Hello and welcome to Need to Know, the programme that tackles the big issues in education that will affect you and the children you teach in the weeks and months ahead. In this programme, the new Key Stage 3 curriculum on its way from September. It's been broadly welcomed for offering schools the space they need to innovate. But what does it actually say and how will it work in practice? To answer that, I'm joined by Mike Baker. Mike, what are the basic facts about the new curriculum?
Well, thank you, Shane, because there's an awful lot to talk about here. Because the new Key Stage 3 curriculum is the biggest shake-up since the national curriculum began almost 20 years ago. The changes, phased in over the next 2 years from this September, will free up a quarter of the school day, allowing schools the time to offer a curriculum tailored to their local character and the needs of their pupils. They're intended to cut clutter and reduce duplication. At the same time, there will be a fresh approach to the work students do, emphasising the key concepts that underpin all subjects, joining up all aspects of the curriculum and placing all of this more firmly in the real world than ever before. For example, schools will have to teach a new economic well-being programme, which focuses on practical areas like careers, enterprise and personal finance. The goal is a generation of school leavers more able to meet the demands of 21st century employment because they are team workers, have flexible skills and are good at problem solving and decision making. Now, when these changes were announced, they were broadly welcomed by teachers' unions, who see the less prescriptive approach as a chance for teachers to innovate and use their own professional judgment. But critics of the new curriculum see dangers in its cross-curricular approach, fearing a retreat from standards and traditional values. Not so, say the government, who stress that the extra time available to teachers is as much about stretching the more able students and providing catch-up for those falling behind. As for the claims of dumbing down, ministers insist that all the core elements of the traditional subjects, for example classic literature or the chronological framework of British history, are still there. For their part, the QCA, the body that maintains and develops the national curriculum, say the changes herald a new era where the curriculum is no longer simply a table of contents for schools, but the entire planned learning experience.
Now, you say this is the biggest shake-up for 20 years since the national curriculum was introduced. Why and why now?
Well, when it first came in, it was meant to take up about 80% of the school timetable. As we know, everything got loaded into the national curriculum. It was very prescriptive and ended up taking about 100%. Now, bit by bit, people have pulled back from that. We had the primary curriculum revised and we've had Key Stage 4 much more flexibility. So now it was the turn of Key Stage 3. But what makes this more interesting, I think, and more radical, is also a bit of a shift of thinking back, in a sense, if you like, to a more progressive approach to education, all built around this new emphasis on personalised learning. And in fact, let's hear a bit now from Mick Waters, who's Director of Curriculum at the QCA, who will explain that.
What we're looking for in the new curriculum is an opportunity for schools to design a curriculum that really fits the needs of their locality. So there are still national parameters, national expectations, but what we want to see are schools grasping the curriculum that suits their community, making the programmes of study, which are really just the ingredients, into a really appetising feast for their youngsters. So what local resources are there? What's nearby that might be exploited? Which businesses, which employers are really interested in the work of the school, and trying to use them as natural resources that would make the curriculum come alive.
I said these changes have been broadly welcomed, but you mentioned the difference in approach between the government and the QCA. Explain.
Yes, I went to the launch of this and it was quite interesting. They were almost speaking about a different sort of language, really, because Ken Boston from the QCA was saying this is a progressive curriculum, it's very modern, it's forward-looking, it's personalised learning and so on. And yet, by contrast, Lord Adonis, the schools minister, was really at pains to emphasise that this is about all the traditional aspects are still there, the aspects of history and so on. And he also wanted to emphasise it's about stretch for the more able and about catch-up. Now, there's a bit of the two together, but I think they're pulling in slightly different directions.
But are they both right?
Well, in a sense, they are both right, and it's a sort of a third way, if we can use that phrase, because they're trying to do both. And I think it's all about where the emphasis lies.
You've given us the basic facts about the new curriculum. Can you be specific about what's in it?
Well, yes, indeed, because there's quite a lot. For a start, there are 15 compulsory subjects in all. The core topics at the very heart of the curriculum are maths, English and science. Then there are 9 foundation subjects. These include history, ICT and modern languages. All of these have compulsory programmes of study that must be covered. The remaining 3 do not have statutory programmes of study. They are religious education, which we're already familiar with, and the 2 new ones, economic well-being and personal well-being.
Well-being sounds dangerously woolly. What are these topics?
Well, well-being in a sense, certainly with the personal well-being, is a bit what we had before with PSHE. It's things like sex education, health education, but also things like the cookery, which of course the government is now saying is compulsory. That's likely to come in there as well. And economic well-being is things like finance, how to open a bank account, but also this quite important area which everyone has to do, which is looking at things like enterprise education.
Interesting, that's the substance, that's the new substance. But I gather the style is changing too, the way that topics are taught, is that right?
Yes, and the descriptions are changing, a whole lot of new jargon to get used to. So, for example, there'll be what's known as an important statement for every subject. Now, this will explain the vital aspects of each subject and explain what learners can expect to gain from them. The key concepts identify the main ideas that learners will need to understand to broaden their learning. And the key processes identify the essential skills that students need to make progress. The range and content outline the breadth of the subject matter from which teachers should draw on, and the curriculum opportunities will identify learning opportunities such as debates or off-site visits that might enhance understanding of the subject.
So less prescriptive, more time, that's all very theoretical. Practically, what chances will there be for teachers to really innovate?
Well, I think there should be opportunity for them to innovate if they're willing to grasp it. It takes a bit of getting used to that they've got this new freedom. I mean, it's things that we talked in there about the learning opportunities, it's things about outdoor education, but it's also bringing subjects together, teaching several subjects through one topics. Some schools are already doing that indeed. And in fact, let's look at what one school, Homewood School and Sixth Form Centre in Kent, is already doing in this front.
We have taken a very brave step by combining and bringing together subjects which I think have a natural affinity with each other. And we've asked staff to construct a curriculum that, yes, of course, addresses the needs of the national curriculum, but looks at combining them in a way which becomes more relevant to the student.
Oh, we could do the demo tank. You know,
Demo tank?
Yeah, where you get the ocean set up and then you put the animals in and you put all the pollution and the kids love it and they're like, oh my god.
Tank, well, like, we're talking like a fish tank.
Yeah. And then we've got to think of maybe...
Well, what the basic idea here, it's mainly about poetry, yes?
Yeah.
Sarah Bennett, Key Stage 3 Literacy Coordinator, and maths teacher Simon Hall team teach Sophie and Jenny's total curriculum class. So they work together on their lesson plans.
It's brilliant fun. Really enjoy it. It's definitely the best part of this experience in terms of total curriculum, what we're doing. Being able to bounce ideas off each other and come up with wacky ideas that you'd never be able to achieve in a small setting.
Being able to sort of play off of each other. If one person's leading the lesson, you've got someone else to also be helping out with sort of the monitoring, checking that everyone's okay. Just feels a lot more comfortable and, as you say, a lot more enjoyable. It's quite a lot of fun having another teacher there.
Yeah. So could you describe our ocean now that we've put the pollution in? Dirty, absolutely. Any other ones, Elise?
We're splitting into groups and we have to write a poem about how
pollutants are going to kill.
Yeah, how they're killing us and stuff.
Now it's like, all right, this can grow. I've got space to grow as a teacher. The children have got space to grow. I mean, this probably will look very different if you came back 2 years from now. Just because there's such a level of innovation, people are really enthusiastic and they're engaged, they want this to work.
Now, every new initiative has critics, and this one has critics, and they're saying that these changes represent that awful word, dumbing down. For instance, Churchill, by which I mean the former Prime Minister, is no longer formally in the curriculum, it's suggested. Is that right?
Well, of course, if you have a curriculum that is more flexible and allows more innovation, obviously some things have to be left out. For example, if you also want to emphasise more skills, which they do, then you can't have quite so much time for prescribed knowledge. Now, as for the specific question of Churchill, let's listen to Mick Waters, Director of Curriculum at the QCA again.
Of course, there are people who endlessly criticise anything new, and the example in this review of the curriculum is the supposed eviction of Sir Winston Churchill, that great English statesman and the person who helped us through the Second World War. My view is that anyone who thinks that the range and content that states we should teach the history of the Second World War would be really struggling to think that we wouldn't do that without covering Sir Winston Churchill and other famous war leaders. And it's one of those hollow arguments that makes great progress in the media because it's something to feast upon, when in fact it's really rather trivial and silly.
Now, these changes come in September, along with a lot of other big changes. For instance, the new diploma system. We'll cover that in a future programme. But all these things coming at once, it seems an awful lot to pile on a teacher's plate, doesn't it?
Yes, you're right. I mean, this is a really big year for curriculum change, and particularly September. An awful lot of things coming in, not just this, but also the diplomas. Now, of course, it's just the first 5 starting, but in future years we'll be building up until eventually there's 17 of those. There are also quite a lot of changes in A-level courses, and also functional skills is quite a big change coming up. So not surprisingly, I think the teacher unions are quite concerned about so much all happening at once. Let's listen to John Bangs, who's Head of Education at the NUT.
You have the new 5 diploma lines coming in. You have the new secondary curriculum. There is also the new type of GCSE with functional skills, and then an extended project for A-levels, all at the same time. And we argued actually that the government should spread that implementation out over a number of years. To a certain extent they've listened, particularly on the secondary curriculum, because there's this transitional period for introduction. But I have to say that it's not the best planning in the world to introduce about 4 or 5 new initiatives.
Well, one has to ask, are these best laid plans, and what conventionally happens to those? Will that happen? I mean, they're big changes, first for 20 years. How do you see all this panning out?
Well, they are big changes, and I think it's going to be quite difficult, because in the end it'll all be down to how teachers and schools react to it. Now remember, for all those years we've actually got quite used in schools to being told exactly what to teach, a very prescriptive national curriculum, and now we're getting a quite different message saying, no, you've got the freedom to innovate, to go through topics, to not necessarily teach discrete subjects. So that's quite a big change, and particularly younger teachers have not been so used to that. So I think the question is whether they can pick up that opportunity and run with it. Let's give the last word to Mick Waters of the QCA again.
Teachers are so influential in children's lives, and if they grab this new curriculum, it's a real opportunity for them and for the children they teach. It's a chance to make teaching really interesting, enjoyable, to make teaching make sense for the child, and through that to gain real satisfaction in the job you do. But it does mean designing a curriculum that's different from the old days. It means schools looking again at things like the timetable and say, is that the best way to deliver the curriculum? It means exploiting the local community opportunities that exist, and it means really enjoying doing it.
Mike, you've been in this game for 20 years. Do you think teachers will embrace these changes?
I think they will. I think they'll find it a little bit scary moving out into this newfound land, but I think they'll embrace it so long as the government doesn't keep doing what it has done, adding yet more subjects like cookery.
Well, that's what you need to know about Key Stage 3 curriculum changes. There's more information and links about the new curriculum on our website. Join us again next time as Mike leads us through another of the big education issues of the day. Until then, from Mike Baker and me, thanks for joining us. Goodbye.